Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Divine and today's video is going to be the second part on how to cut and sew this beautiful 3-layered gathered dress with a basque waistline. In my previous tutorial I showed us how to go about the pattern drafting of this dress and also how to cut the lower part. So today's video I'll be showing us how to cut and sew the upper part and also how to sew the lower part. So I have my Ankara fabric here, my estée, my lining and my pattern. The first thing I'll do is to iron my estée on my Ankara fabric and cut out my pattern. So I've added my seam allowance of 1/2 inch all round, but on the side front and the side back I added the seam allowance of 1 inch. And the zipper side, the zipper allowance I added 1.25 for the zipper. I've also cut out the lining piece for these patterns here and I've labeled them accordingly. I labeled both the Ankara fabric and the lining piece accordingly, so we are not confused. What I'll do next is to cut out the wording that I'll be using to pad the bustier of this dress, to pad the bust area of this dress. So the wording for the center piece is going to be on fold. I'll cut out, and I'm going to cut out 1/2 inch away from the top of this because I don't want the wording to get to the seam allowance at the top. So I'll do the same thing, and my wording is starting from my under bust. I'll make sure the wording does not get to 1/2 inch at the top, which is going to be for my seam allowance. Now I'll turn over the middle part and make sure the side with the gum on the wording faces the fabric. I'll turn it over like so. I'll just trim off the excess that is getting to the seam allowance. Then I'll sew with loose stitches on both sides. And for the side piece, I'm going to place the wording correctly, making sure the side with the shining side, that is the side with the gum, faces the fabric. Then I'll sew with loose stitches. After doing that, I'm going to join these 3 pieces using 1/2 inch, and I'll open up the seam allowance and iron it properly. I'll do the same for the wording. I'll join the 3 pieces using 1/2 inch. Now for the back pieces, I've labeled them accordingly. I'm going to open them up and arrange it properly. The middle to middle, the center back to center back. Then I'll sew the middle to middle using 1/2 inch. I'll do the same for the lining. I will arrange it properly, middle to middle, and sew with 1/2 inch. So now for the strap of the upper part of my blouse, I have a width of 4 inches. I'll divide these 3 yards I have here into 2. Then I'm going to measure a length of 43 inches. I'll mark 43 inches. It can be longer and it can be shorter depending on what length you want to have. So I have 2 pieces, one for the left, one for the right. So I'll fold this into 2 now. I'll sew here with 1/2 inch and sew here all the way with 1/2 inch. Then turn it out from the opening at the other side and give it a good press. So this is my bustier here. I've ironed it properly. You can see how beautiful it looks. What I'll do next is to mark 1 inch away from this joining I'm having here. The joining we used to join the side to the middle piece. I'll mark 1 inch away from there. Then I'll get my strap now, and the side that is open, I'm going to be placing it on that 1 inch. So I explained this when I was drafting out my pattern, so please refer to that video for better understanding. I'll pin it. Then on this other side here, the joining there, I'll mark 1 inch out, 1 inch out, then place my strap on that 1 inch. And this strap is the part that is open I'm placing here. The other parts are sealed. So I'm placing my lining now, using my lining to turn the neckline, and the right side of my lining will face the right side of my fabric. I'll sew the neckline with 1/2 inch. I'll also put my hemming gum there so when I iron it lays flat. So this is my back piece after sewing. I'm going to be turning this with the lining now, and the right side of my lining will face the right side of my fabric. I'll place it like so, then sew the neckline with 1/2 inch and sew the center back with 0.25. So this is what we're having. This is for my bustier and the strap. You can see how beautiful it's coming up. So this is my back piece here. After sewing, I'm going to turn it over to the right side. Then take it to my machine and sew the lining to the Ankara piece using loose stitches so that it stays in place. And after doing that for the two back pieces, I'll place them together like so, then pin them. After which I'm going to mark my seam allowance of 1 inch, my zipper allowance of 1 inch. I'll sew with loose stitches. Loose stitches please, because we're still going to be loosening it out. Then place the front on it and sew the sides with 1 inch. So this is it. I've shaped my upper part. This is how beautiful it looks. You can see how nice this looks already. What I'll do next is to measure the lower part. I'll measure what I'm having on the waistline here, and all together I'm having 17 inches on fold. That's 34 inches all round, plus the seam allowance of 1 inch. That's 36 inches. So I've cut out my lining piece in my previous video. I've rolled the hem in 1 inch and I've drawn out my gather stitch at the waistline here. What I'll do is to get the midpoint, I'll notch it. I'll just highlight this midpoint so we can see it. After doing that, I'm going to get my pattern paper here where I illustrated the lower part of this dress, and I'm going to be marking out where we are going to be sewing our layers on. So we need a guide. So we're going to be sewing on this part that is marked blue, like I explained in the previous video. So I need to measure exactly where it is on the lining, so when we're sewing it, it is easy. So I'll measure from the top here to the blue fabric here. I'll measure what I'm having, and whatever I'm having there, I'll add ½ inch to it because of the ½ inch on the waistline of the lining. So we don't have ½ inch on this pattern here, but we have ½ inch on the lining. So whatever I have there, I'll mark it out. Then measure what I have from that blue line to the next blue line. Or I'll measure what I'm having from the waistline to the next blue line. I'll add ½ inch to it and mark it out. So basically, these blue lines is where we are going to be sewing the layers on. Exactly where we're going to be sewing the layers on. So we need to mark this all the way on the lining, so that we are not sewing the lining anyhow. So it's like a guide. I'll get my first layer now. I'll notch the midpoint. This is the midpoint of my first layer. I'm going to be placing the midpoint of this first layer on the midpoint of my lining. Then I'll draw the gathers on the Ankara fabric to be equal to what I have on the waistline of the lining. And when I'm sewing, I'm going to skip 1 inch at the beginning first before I start drawing my gathers and sew it to the lining. So when I'm sewing the Ankara to the lining, I'll skip 1 inch before sewing. And when I get to the end also, I'll skip 1 inch. I'll end it 1 inch before I get to the end. Basically, leave 1 inch at the beginning and at the end. I'll explain later on in this video. So I'll draw out my gathers and make sure it's matching up the waistline of the lining. I'll get my second fabric, second layer. I'll get the midpoint and notch. I'm going to use my chalk to highlight that midpoint. So we're going to be sewing the second layer exactly on this line that we've marked. So but I'll turn it over like so. I'll turn it over upwards, then pin the midpoint together, so that we'll sew it and it falls. I hope you understand that. That the eye on the seam allowance is not showing. Then I'll place this at the beginning like so, and make sure that draw out my gathers and make sure the gathers I'm having is equal to what I'm having on the waistline. And I said we'll skip 1 inch before and after. So I'll make sure that, and the gathers must be even. So we need to draw out these gathers before sewing on the line. So when I get to my machine, I will do that. I'm going to draw out my gathers to be even. If not, one side is going to be bulky than the other if your gathers is not even. So I'll do the same for the third piece. I'll turn it over like so. I'll pin the 2 midpoints, then draw out my gathers. So this is it, guys. After doing that, you can see how beautiful it is, and you can also see how the layers are lapping properly on each other. That is, you can barely see the lining when the dress is together. So I'll turn this over now, and I'm going to highlight the midpoint here. And on the waistline of the upper part, I measured 17 inches on fold. So I'm going to be drawing one side of my gathers to be 17 inches plus 1 inch for zipper, that's 18 inches. And I'll draw the gathers on the other side to be 18 inches also. So that by the time we sew it to the upper part, everything fits in properly. So I'm going to sew it to the upper part after drawing the gathers, and this is what I'm having after doing that. Here our dress is coming out so well. Next, I'll flip it over like so we can sew our zipper. I'll pin the waistline together, making sure it's equal. I'll pin the upper parts together, making sure it's equal. Then I'm going to sew with loose stitches, and below that waistline there, I'm going to mark about 4 to 5 inches where I'm going to stop sewing my zipper. So I'll sew with loose stitches from the beginning. I'll stop at that 5 inches, I'll top stitch. And you can also see that I stopped sewing my Ankara fabric 1 inch away from the lining, like I mentioned earlier. I didn't sew it all the way to the end. So I'm going to arrange this properly on this side. I'll pin it like I've sewn it. I'll sew with loose stitches to that point, I'll top stitch. Then I'm going to notch very close to where I top stitched, but make sure I don't cut through. This is so that we can properly sew this lower part, and this is how you sew lower parts for dresses like this. I'm going to push in all the Ankara fabric. That is why I said we do not sew it to the end. I'll push in all the Ankara fabric and sew only the lining with 1 inch. I'll sew it with 1 inch. Then I'm going to fix my zipper. So this is my zipper after doing that. I sewed only the Ankara fabric with 1 inch, and I've not sewn the Ankara yet. So I'll turn it over like so. So when sewing, you cannot just hold everything together. That is an error. So then I'm going to finish the Ankara fabric here. I'll turn it over, take it up, turn it over, sew with 1 inch. I'll pick up the second layer, I'll turn it upwards, sew with 1 inch, and pick up the third layer, take it up and sew with 1 inch. So by the time we do this, each of the layers can flow individually. We're not supposed to just bunch it up at the back. So this is what I'm having. And now for the strap. For the front, we measured 6.5. We came down with 6.5 inches, and for the back we came down with 7 inches. So that is a total of 13.5 inches. So I'm going to mark 13.5 inches on this strap, but because you want it to be a little bit fitted on the strap, you can minus ½ inch from that, or you can also decide to minus 1 inch from that, so that it is very firm on the shoulder. So after marking it, I'm going to place it where I want it to be. You can place it on the midpoint on the dart. You can place the midpoint of the strap on the dart, or you can place it like this also, anyhow that is comfortable for you. After that, I'll sew on the tip of the neckline there, and this is what I'm having after doing that. Our dress came out so beautiful, guys. So if you've not watched the first part of this tutorial, I'll be leaving the link in my description box, so do well to watch that. So that'll be all for this tutorial. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye for now.